So I have here the 4 principles of UI design. What I'm showing currently is the sneak peek of Acadmus. It's still a work in progress, so it might not be perfect as of the moment, since we're on phase 2 of the development. So here, first principle is the contrast. So if you can see, it gives us the ability to focus on the differences. So it allows the user and the designer as well to define values, priorities, and properties. So for example, this login button should be the primary button versus this one. So we have to think about the contrast. And then next, the visual hierarchy. So it refers to guiding the eye on the page, so it attends to different design elements in order of their importance. So based on our research or user experience research, we started with the cover photo as our main priority, since it dictates kind of a graphical summary of what the class is all about. And then we have the number 2, the title of the class. And if you can notice, inside number 2, we also have a separate visual hierarchy. We have the header and the subheader. And then we have the description, the title description, and the subheader as well. And then for the 4th is the class. So this is the last, since we have to explain the class, the description of the course before showing the class. And then for the scale, example is the medium application. So for the scale, popular articles are usually larger than other articles. So the scale kind of directs the users to potentially more interesting article. And then last is the balance. So for the balance, the composition feels stable, which is especially appropriate when you're looking for a course that you love for this example. So the balance is symmetrical. So there are other things to consider then in terms of creating UI. So first is inspire clarity, enable interactions, use the right colors. For the right colors, it's based then sa branding ng client. Also yung semantic colors, like if it's warning, it should be yellow. If it's error, it should be red. Also, we have to be consistent with user expectations. If the button is this kind, for example, it's 100 pixel wide, it should be 100 pixel wide throughout the entire application. And then we have to conserve attention. I have example later for that. And then, of course, human-centered interaction. So we wanted to communicate with the user clearly. So for example, I also have another example for that human-centered interaction later. So what are the tools that I'm recommending for doing UI? So we have similar din naman siya sa UX. We have Figma, Sketch, XD, and Creative Cloud. Although I know that Creative Cloud is XD is under Creative Cloud. I just wanted to iterate XD more, since CXD is like 90% used in doing product design rather than Photoshop or Illustrator. So back to my first slide, one of my first slides. So I think UX should not be versus UI. UX, the versus should be a heart instead, since they should be working together. So that's the primary work of UX UI, is to work together, and in order to create working together to create a successful product. So I'll define first what, since baka may confusion, what UX versus UI na deliverables or artifacts. So ito yung UX UI's task. For UX, it studies and analyzes the behavior of the users, elaborates scenarios and task flows, does research, and outlines wireframes. And then for UI, more on the visible part of the application, matches the colors and typography, creates layouts, composes graphics, generally takes care of the visual design. And then one thing na I think na UX and UI can collaborate is the prototype, the mock-up prototype. So here is the higher level view of a product design process that I'm implementing to my team since we're a software development company. So first is we have the business analyst. I'm not going to tackle that since I'm not a BA person. So after the BA kasi, to give you a quick background lang, it's just it's about gathering business requirements and analysis then sa applications and with the client as well. So after he created yung mga BA artifacts, so yung BA to transfer the those artifacts to the UX UI team or product design team. So we could start with the UX research. UX research is more on yung kay napakita ko, internal auditing, lightning demos, external auditing. And then for the UX design, so it helps yung customer retention and conversion rates. So different UX research and design, since research kasi is more on parang naka-compose siya in a document type, and then UX design is more on the information architecture. And then for the UI design, so visual elements to, we will start doing the low fidelity wireframes, and then low fidelity mockups to high fidelity mockups. And then we transfer it to interaction design, which is the prototype. So the idea here is to have the user or the target user engage the product before developing. And then we start with the usability testing. So this is the real-time na testing to the users to design the ease of use. And for me, yung two factors, it's useful and usable, which I've discussed earlier, that useful should complete a task. And useful is the effectiveness, which users can do the task or achieve the task. And then we have the UX UI audit and consultancy. So we have here the evaluation of the weaker areas in an existing website or application, and we try to find a way to improve them. So after that, after all of that has been finalized, we are done with the product design process, and then we'll transfer it to the front-end developer or the software engineers, so they could start working on the development phase. So let me give you some few examples of bad UX UI. So first, this is pretty obvious. You don't want to type in a number in a drop-down form since it takes a lot of time. And then we also have here the please enter your phone number, that is a scale and another drop-down, which is very bad user experience. This is very obvious. And I don't think there are applications that are made for this one. This is just, for example, but this one, this is some of the minor UX issues that might be overlooked. For example, do you really want to cancel the reservation? So there might be a confusion that cancel means yes, and yes means cancel. So in a way, we could try to revisit this, and maybe instead of cancel, we could put in no instead of cancel. So yeah, so another thing is that this website, I think there's a lot of UI errors here, since yung nasabi ko kanina, we have to conserve attention. And I think once you've opened this one, more overwhelms user, and then actually the design speaks for itself. And then similar to what we have in the field heads, we should also conserve attention, and we should inspire clarity. So yeah, if they have the budget, they could maybe hire a product designer to increase the conversion rate. And then for the one example, UX UI kasi hindi lang naman siya under designing software applications na na-experience nito during different scenarios. For example, yung Miss Universe last 2015, yung mistake ni Steve Harvey sa nasabi niya si Colombia as a winner. So I think one factor is that yung pag-layout ng this card. So I'm suggesting, so there's a lot of suggestions in doing this card. So I think it could really help if we try to redesign it in this kind of way para hindi nakakalito. So actually this is one of my final thoughts. So why is this user experience, user interface important? So a great user experience kasi and UI designer is everyone's responsibility. So in a project kasi we have designers, developers, BAs, PMs, account managers, engagement managers, and responsibility natin lahat to create a great user experience. And product designer's role is to align and ensure we get there. So we try to initiate and design the UX UI, and then we also have to, if we are the developers, we have to think about the other factors of UI as well. For example, if you're a developer, we have to lessen the load time. And for example, the email should be sent to, it should be directed to the inbox, not to the draft. So we have to collaborate with the entire team in order to create a successful product. And that's it for my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you, Sir Ian. I really love the way you put it together. Dapat hindi siya UI versus UX, but it should be UI love UX.
Yes.
And in the end, as they mesh together, you have a successful, useful, and usable product in the end.
Yes.
Okay, so encourage everyone to ask questions. Let's dig deep more from Sir Ian para makuha natin, magkaroon ng knowledge transfer somehow. Okay, there's a question here, Sir Ian, sa chat box natin. Hello, can you explain more about internal and external auditing? Like what exactly do you do during those processes?
Okay, perfect. So internal and external auditing kasi in our team, we have business analysts kasi na they gave us the artifacts that I've explained. We try to gather a lot of questions. We start by asking a lot of questions sa client, and then yung artifacts naman kasi nun is based from the client. So the story itself, from the core purpose, the company vision is from the client. So yung lahat ng internal and external auditing came from the client. So after that, we try to gather all of those artifacts to to identify the problem and create a solution.
Okay, thank you, Sir Ian. There's another question.
Yes, po. Out systems, perfect.
Something
So
to do with out
can you enlighten?
systems.
Awesome.
You mentioned out system earlier. Can you enlighten us further about it? Can you use it as a tool? Yeah. Yes.
Yes, for sure. Out systems kasi it's a low-code development platform. So out systems kasi uses C++ ata, if I'm not mistaken, and it doesn't really use a lot of front-end frameworks. So for me, out systems is good on the development side if you are more on the multimedia, since you could do or create designs easily. And then for UX UI naman, I think this is, in my opinion lang, kind of, I feel like medyo restricted si designer when it comes to low-code platforms, since if you compare it to traditional coding, traditional coding is much more flexible in terms of doing front end and in terms of designing applications based on the timeline. Since if it's out systems kasi naka-pre-create na si components like the, for example, the table, you don't need to create or code the table. You just have to drag and drop the table and the data. So it might take time to update the design in OutSystems. Although yeah, the user experience is much more, I guess, more actionable task in the OutSystems rather than the UI, since OutSystems, and as I've said earlier, OutSystem has already created their own UI components. Although they could change the designs, but it might take time compared to a traditional coding.
Thank you, Sir Ian. Let me just chip in a little bit now about OutSystems. Of course, you can use that to teach your students, but just like what was mentioned earlier on about the different tools that is being used, you should not box yourself in one tools only. You could venture on so many tools that are available online. But when you want just to teach your student with UI UX, it's a good option, but we cannot zero in on OutSystems alone. Tama ba ako, Sir Ian?
Yes, sir, I agree po.
All right. So any more question, please? We still have more or less 10 minutes para i-corner natin.
Yeah, I saw yung question. So is it possible to enter UI UX design team with a little experience? Well, yes, that's my current experience. Yan yung experience ko. Actually, zero experience with UI UX. So I just started doing yung mga HTML, CSS, and then I started working as a web designer or UI UX. So yeah, possible siya as long as you have the right mentors. You are joining UX communities, and of course you do the UI UX practice as well, since you'll learn UX UI while doing the practice itself. I hope that answers your question. Ayan si Anne. So actually, si Anne kasi blockmate ko siya. So what are the habits and soft skills I need to develop to become a great UI UX designer? So yeah, as I have mentioned then before, for soft skills, I think you have to be more vocal with the client and with your team, kasi we have to collaborate. UI UX kasi it's not just a single person, it's a design team. So we have to communicate well with all of the design team, even the developers, and even the project managers or account managers. So I think that's the most important part in doing UI UX, is just to communicate with everyone. And then another question, do you think it's worth it to apply UX? Actually, yes. And actually, yes. There are a lot of UI UX boot camps kasi, and there are also free boot camps. I've joined a lot of boot camps with UI UX and programming, and I think it helped me mapunta where I am today. So joining UI UX bootcamp kasi will help you do the practice itself. Kasi ang mahirap kasi if we try to study lang sa YouTube or via or ano lang, or kunwari sa Udemy, since we have to do it in practice and try to do UI UX with a design team as well. I am perfect. So good question. What are your thoughts on the current demand or lack of UI UX in the Philippines? Actually, one of the main reasons why we lack UI UX, based on my opinion, is that we undervalued UI UX, and we feel like UI UX is easy. So we don't. So usually, other companies don't invest in UI UX since they don't see the value in it yet. Kasi si software developers kasi is creating the application, so if they think it's easy, they try to give the UI UX to the software developers. And then, okay. Can you give some advice on how we can teach students about UI UX and what topics you recommend to start with? Okay, I'll answer first the advice on how we can we teach students about UI UX. I think you can then Sir Jadi if you wanted to answer this, but I'll answer this as well. I think advice ko lang muna is to do UI UX in practice muna, to have different projects, to have first-hand experience in creating applications. You have you can empathize with the developers and with your target users, and then that's the way. I think yun yung magiging way para you can start teaching UI UX. And then what apps can we teach them to start with? I think sa apps kasi it's more on the UI side. We have to also teach the foundation for the UX, like the design process. I mean the design thinking process, doing the discovery phase, and then for the applications, it's more on the UI. We could I recommend Figma if you're starting out, since Figma's free plan is more premium rather than the XD. And then I have a question from Kai. She's one of my colleagues then. She's from actually UXPH. And one on the process you mentioned earlier, when should UX start? Okay, perfect. So actually Kai kasi is a UX writer. So I get the point of her question. Would it better if it's agile or UX writer? For this one, I think it's part of the UX design after the UX research. It's before we try to design the UI itself. So we have to create the content first in order to create the UI itself. Or if it's on Agile naman, I think it's kasi different kasi si Agile. Yung UX writer, if it's Agile, should be in the entire flow of the design process.
All right, thank you.
Yes,
We have, I think, si Sir Mark Joseph Palarca is raising his hand.
Thank you, Kim
Yes.
Scott. So, Sir Ian, how did your understanding of UX evolve over time? Like, di ba, like after you graduated, you work as a web designer.
Mm-hmm.
Tapos like you went full stack, tapos bumalik ka sa UI. Like, how different was your first experience compared to now?
Okay, good question. So, hi Mark, batchmate ko siya before, ID 114. Yeah, good question. So nag-start kasi ako as web designer, and I feel like nakulangan ako sa web design. And since I'm not yet particular with the design process in 2018, so that's why I tried to learn front-end development and back-end development to further hone my skills. And then after that, I've joined some UX communities, and then I've learned na hindi lang siya basta design, na you're doing this kind of parang landing page or web design or micro website. Meron din palang like content management system, which is super hard compared to creating micro websites. So after that, after na-realize ko siya, I tried to go back to UI UX after being a full stack developer, since and I think being a full stack developer before helped me then to empathize with my co UI UX designers, since I have the idea in doing the front end development stuff. Like I know yung mga restrictions when it comes to front end, and I could work on that restrictions kasi based on the timeline that maybe the client or your timeline, the client's timeline. So I think yun yung naging factor ko in when it comes to web design, to being a full stack engineer, to now a product design, UX UI designer. I hope that answers your question, Sir Mark.
Nasagot naman. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your wonderful question, Sir Mark. And do you have any other questions? Actually, while the others are still thinking, probably kung ano yung pwede nilang itanong sa'yo, Ian, or Sir Ian pala, no? Kaya the student ako ngayon. I have questions, no? This is actually for the sake of our students here who are design-based. Okay, so these are mostly designers. So, and you came from the multimedia arts program in Benil specifically, and you know that the profile of our students are mostly designers, di ba? So layout artists tayo, designers.
Yes.
Meron kasing confusion sometimes with the students. Ano nga ba ang dapat unahin? Is it UX ba or UI ba? Kasi kanina, natanong ko to because when you were showing some slides, on examples of bad UX. Nandun yung design eh. No? So for us to know if hindi maganda yung experience ng isang tao sa designer, meron na tayong mock-ups. So ano nga ba ang dapat nating unahin?
Yeah, yes po, good question po, Miss Kat. I think UX po talaga should start, but yung UX is more on the UX research and then UX design. And then once na nag-start na si UI design, they could collaborate with the UX as well to create the UI, since yung UI kasi may part din ng user experience but very minimal lang, more on the visual aspect lang si UX inside the UI, since we have to work out on the visible part of the application. So after the user experience research and the UX design, we could collaborate in creating the low fidelity wireframes, low fidelity mockups, and turn it into a high fidelity design. So sa examples po kasi ng bad UX UI, they should have the usability testing then after creating the UI in order to parang hindi maging bad experience. So we also have the usability testing after creating the UI, and then we also have the UI UX internal audit. But going back to your question, for me, it should be UX first before UI, and then collaborate then at the same time in the middle after. When matatapos na yung task ni UX.
Okay, thank you. And follow-up question. So you mentioned a while ago that the UX and the UI is composed of an entire team. So what can you give us as tips for freelancers? No, we have a lot to go into creating websites for clients, but solo flight, they're usually solo flight. Okay, so isa lang sila. Ano yung pwede mong tip or tips na ibigay sa kanila para ma-practice pa rin nila yung UX? Even if they're just solo lang sila. It's a one-man team.
Good question po. Actually, yun po yung first experience ko, one-man team lang din before. So I think yung one-man team is possible naman in creating UX UI as a freelancer. So okay lang din naman siya, but I think it really helps if you have a team, since if you are just a solo UX UI, you might be biased sa design mo or sa flow mo. So we have to ask other designers as well, which it could help the output as well. But I think UX UI could also work as one, as long as we have as na gone through natin yung UX process, since kaya din naman siya ng one person.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions pa from the audience?
Miss Kat,
Yes, sir.
while waiting for some other questions, I agree very much kay Sir Ian about that. Usually kasi dalawa yung direction natin, no, sa development and design. It's either you join a group in a company and learn from them, and then pull out and then be a one-man team, or you start just like Ian did, a one-man team, and then eventually he has to really check on various communities so that he could learn from them, and then putting up a team, and then coming up with a better solution dun sa mga designs. So yun yung direction. So whichever direction you go, you will still emerge as a better person on both ends. So that's it.
Yan,
Yes, sir. I
thank
agree.
you, sir. Okay, sir. Sige, take it away, sir. Meron po, wala na yan siya. Ayun, meron pong question. From Don Red, hi. What's an example of a perfect UI UX design?
Oh, okay, good question, DJ. Batchmate ko
DJ.
din siya. Shout out, DJ. Actually, there's...
Dahil mong batchmates ngayon, Ian, ah.
Yeah, thank you for supporting, guys. So I think that there's no perfect UX UI design kasi if alam naman natin UX UI design is or software is continuously evolving. So we have to sumabay tayo sa pag-evolve ng technology, and then if we create a perfect design, that means na we're not parang embracing the evolution of technology. So I don't think there's a perfect UX design, but although I think that there's a successful product design, and I can give some examples. Example is the Netflix, or I've shown earlier, Spotify, since ang ganda ng kanyang navigations, and Pinterest, among other applications.
Okay, thank you. Next, from Carl, should developers or programmers be designers as well?
I think developers should stick to developers since ang lawak ng developer or ng programming language. For example, for developer, you have to stick to JavaScript, and then meron din siyang framework like React.js. So I think that they should stick with that since malawak siya. And then if you're a UI UX, you have to specialize din in UI UX since malawak din si UX UI. So I really suggest si UX UI and programmer should be a separate role.
All right, thank you. And then there's a comment from Antonio. I think it's better to design something that's adaptable for users rather than a perfect UI UX design. Something that's comfortable to use in the long run.
Yes, I agree. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Meron pa bang mga katanungan? It's already 2:35. Okay, so I think we can have one more question, one last from the audience. Meron pa ba before Sir Zaldi closes the program? Okay, Sir Zaldi, I think okay na tayo, no? I think our audience was able to get the answers that they want, and I think Ian did a good presentation.
Thank you. Just to add po pala, ABJD Studios is hiring part-time UX UI designers, so you may email me at ian@ABJD Studios if you're interested. So that's it.
Okay, thank you, Sir Ian and Miss Kat. Actually, I was about to tell that, Sir Ian. If you want to get more out of Sir Ian, hit him up. Okay, so you can actually contact him, and I might as well do that. So thank you for staying with us in MMAAP Talk 2021 episode 3, which is product design and UX designing application for everyone by Sir Ian Alcantara, our very own at Binil. And I'm actually thankful that it went well, and even me, as somebody who is in the development side for the longest time that I've been, I was able to pick up some few salient points dun sa mga diniscuss ni Sir Ian. No? So, kasi sometimes I'm biased with what I do, being parang, sabi ko, mga new entrants, mga itong kasama ko, I'll have to dominate the thing. But eventually, I'm learning that even now I've learned na I really have to involve everyone.
Yeah. Totoo yan, sir. We could never stop learning, even if we're teachers. And that's why, totoo yung sinabi mo kanina, no? We feel good every time we see our students or former students now dominating the industry. Kasi
Yes.
it's a validation for us that we did our job well. So mas
It's a
gusto
joy,
namin na
no?
mas maganda, mas magaling pa kayo kaysa sa amin.
Precisely. So
Yes.
siguro for all students that we know that you are somehow successful in some aspect than us, and hands up to that. We thank you for that, and try to contribute also in one way or another, just like what Sir Ian has done today. You have the strong points, strong skills on some aspects of multimedia arts. Communicate with MMAAP, join MMAAP, and let's build the community together. So again,
Yes.
with that, we thank everyone, the MMAAP organization, of course, Ms. Kat, who facilitated the Q&A, and most especially kay Sir Ian, who despite all odds and everything that is happening around, he did not give an excuse na, sir, lumilindol or bumabagyo. or something. So thank you again, Sir Ian, and
Thank you then for giving me
we'll
the opportunity to
extend
speak.
our appreciation to you. We might not do it here, but there will be a way to extend our appreciation to what you have contributed to MAAP and to the multimedia community in the Philippines. Again, thank you, and it is so much appreciated sa lahat ng mga umattend. Hope to see you soon, not only as listener maybe you will be one of the one who will give us a talk someday,
Yes.
one of these days. Okay, Ms. Kat, any parting
Okay
words?
na, sir.
Okay na. Okay, thank you again, and God bless everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Bye-bye. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
God bless.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.